Hello, Thought Roomies, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Hallie Rose. This morning, as I record, I am feeling so much gratitude and excitement in my body as I think about our Thought Roomie community that's growing so strong. And I've had some really amazing stories shared with me over the past couple weeks about people all over the world who are finding and coming to our show. And I know that the reason that that's happening is because of each and every one of you. Every time you share an episode, every time you tell somebody about the show while you're standing in line somewhere or at your yoga studio and you refer people here, understand that you might not even know the impact of what sharing this information is really going to do in somebody else's life. You don't know the doorways and the portals and the gifts that it could open for realizations inside themselves. And so I just want to thank you so much for genuinely sharing out of the goodness of your heart when these messages resonate with you. Cool little story from my life. I was in Miami a few weeks ago doing my sound training and holographic sound healing with Paul Hubbard, who is a former guest on this show. And my father called me excitedly to share a story. And he was at lunch with a friend of his. And my father lives in upstate New York. And he was with a friend that he hadn't seen in a while, and they were making small talk to the waiter, and they were all talking about podcasts. And my father said, "Oh, my daughter has a podcast. It's The Thought Room with Hallie Rose." And his friend, who he had not seen in a while, looked over at my dad and said, "Wow, that sounds really familiar." And my dad said, "Oh, well, let's check your Apple Podcasts. Maybe you're subscribed, or maybe you're subscribed on Spotify. Let's see." And his friend said, "Wait a minute. I'm going to do one thing better. I think I got a text message about this." And my father's friend opened his text messages, and sure enough, from another friend in a completely different state, he had gotten a text that said, "Hey, you have to check out this show," and had sent him an episode of The Thought Room. And it was really, really neat for me to have my father share this proud moment where he was getting to watch this show be spread across America, and as we now know, looking at the statistics, across many, many, many countries. And so I just want to thank you all for spending your time here. It's not lost on me, and I cherish every moment that we get to spend together. This month, we have been doing a review drive on Apple. In the podcasting world, written reviews are like the golden ticket. This show takes a great deal of energy and money and time to produce, and we have a wonderful team of 5 who keep it running. And we do this because we believe in the messages that are being shared here. We believe in these stories, and we know that they have the power to shift individual lives, and therefore the power to shift the collective. So it's a big vision that we have here at the Thought Room, and you are absolutely a part of it. You are a critical part of this community. You belong here, and you're listening to this for a reason. That's the synchronicity of the universe telling you something. So when something resonates, it is quite actually vibrating in resonance with our bodies. It's like when you hear a song that lights you up and you feel lighter or shifted or energized after listening to it. It's actual sound vibration. That's energy, and energy is the currency of our universe. So if you care to be a part of the positive energy feedback loop of our little universe over here at the Thought Room, I'd love to ask that you please take a second right now as you're listening to this intro and go to Apple Podcasts. Even if you are a Spotify listener, but you have the Apple app on your iPhone, please head over to Apple and just take this moment to type a line or two from your heart about your experience of the show. Even if it's as simple as, "I love this show," period. That would mean a lot to us. And if you do this, please leave your Instagram handle in the review and you'll be automatically entered to win a one-on-one call with me. And this is your last chance to enter because on the next episode that we release, we're going to be announcing the winner of that. So make sure you get it in. Do it now while you're listening if you're not driving. And make sure you're subscribed to the show because we have some mind-blowing guests coming up next. This episode of The Thought Room is brought to you by Third Eye Cacao. So if you don't know about cacao, cacao is the chocolate bean and it grows in various parts of the world. The indigenous Amazonians believe that ceremonial cacao can open their hearts. And cacao is rich in theobromine, which is a native relative to caffeine. So not only do you get an energizing boost from drinking cacao, you also get these gorgeous heart-opening effects. And today, in my episode with Neil Ryan Dumra, we open up our interview with talking about the cacao that we are drinking in this episode. And Neil has an incredible story, an incredible life journey. I just can't wait for you to hear it. But he speaks so highly and meticulously about the sourcing of his cacao. And I don't know about you, but more and more with the state of the world and the importance of keeping our health in check, I am getting more and more vigilant about where things are sourced from. I'm making sure all of my products that I buy are organic. I'm making sure that all of the ingredients on the label are pure and they're not additives. And I'm really buckling down on keeping the purity of my body in check because our body is the vehicle for our consciousness. And if you don't have a pure vehicle and a vehicle that's not in pain or suffering, it's incredibly difficult to self-actualize in any sort of way. So taking care of the body is number one. What I love about Neil's cacao is that it's organically grown, it's handpicked, and it's sun-dried. And they use this cold crumbled cacao paste from Ecuador, and then they add a plethora of other adaptogens and herbs like maca, ashwagandha, lion's mane, and then they flavor it with organic nutmeg, organic cinnamon, organic clove, organic cardamom, and organic ginger, and all the spices that make chai so delicious. And I watched him make me a cup of this cacao, and if you're busy like me, you're going to love this because I just watched him boil water and blend it up, and then it was ready to serve. We didn't have to add anything else because it even has organic coconut powder in it. So you don't need to add creamer unless you want to. You just boil and blend. So Neil, our guest today, is the owner of Third Eye Cacao, and he gifted me a large bag of this Third Eye Cacao elixir powder. We were drinking it all through this episode, and I've even decided to host my own cacao ceremony at my home in a few weeks using this. The cacao that you buy at a store is not going to be blended with all the herbs and spices and adaptogens that you get in the Third Eye Tonic elixir. Neil has formulated this blend based on his extensive research and knowledge on Ayurveda and his unique upbringing and his journey, which you'll hear more about in this episode. We'll talk about cacao as a great alternative to coffee and how cacao can give you that morning energy without the crash of caffeine. And it really connects you to your heart instead of jacking up your blood pressure and sending you into that space of the doing mind. Lastly, when you purchase a bag or a canister of Third Eye Cacao, you support Neil and small business. And a portion of your purchase will actually be donated back to this show. And on top of that, you're also making an investment in yourself, your health, and bringing increased balance to your body, your mind, and your spirit. So that is a win-win-win. I recommend if you're going to try something for the first time, I like the Third Eye Cacao elixir powder that Neil gave me. Or you can get the Third Eye Cacao Starter Kit, which even comes with a little hand mixer, so you're all ready to go. So whether you're creating an everyday ritual for yourself in the morning, or you plan on having a cacao ceremony for yourself and those that you love, consider checking out thirdeyecacao.com/thoughtroom. That's ThirdEyecacao.com/thoughtroom, and punch in the code ThoughtRoom, all one word, for 15% off your entire order. Check the show notes for a click-through link, and you can get there super speedy. Without further ado, my friends, yes, step into the thought room with myself and Neil Ryan Dumra. Neil, welcome to the Thought Room. I'm so excited to have you here. I've been looking forward to this for weeks. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hallie, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So you and I met, I believe it was back in February at our mutual friend, Charles Clay's birthday party, who has also been a guest on this podcast, as has his wife, Brandolyn Clay. So yeah, we met there and we were at the dinner table, and within like 10 minutes of knowing you, I was like, will you please be on my podcast? Will you please be a guest in my men's program, The Conscious Man, which you were. And I just had this gnosis about you, about your wisdom, about your life experience. And the more that I get to know you, the more I'm just impressed with not only what you've been through, because you've had some really harrowing experiences, which I'm sure we'll get into on this podcast, but all that you've studied and your childhood and your upbringing. So we'll dive into some of that in a second. But when you came over just a few minutes ago, you brought me a gift, which was a package of your ceremonial cacao. So will you, for everyone listening who isn't really maybe familiar with all the benefits of cacao, it's one of those things too in the spiritual community, it's kind of blowing up. I know when I was living in New York for 5 years, every 3 days there was a cacao ceremony and sound bath happening in Brooklyn. So what is it about cacao? Why is this so important? And if you can bring your knowledge, your expertise of Ayurveda and all those aspects in, kind of tell me about how cacao came into your life and why it's so important.
For sure. Cacao came into my life during a very difficult time. And I personally feel like it's one of those superfoods that is very complete in a lot of ways. It's energetic, but it's also chock full of magnesium and all these minerals. And it makes you happy. It has theobromine, which is like the antithesis to coffee, what caffeine is. So it opens up your heart, releases oxytocin, puts you in these bliss and joyful spaces. And people a lot of times talk about being in the heart space. And this is like a medicine that helps you get there. And most cacao is heavily processed. They take the fat out, and the actual genetics is a hybrid species of what cacao was. So I specifically source a type of cacao that is medicinal in certain ways. So
it's so good. It's so velvety. And I was asking you as you were making it, I was like, do we need to add anything to this? And you were like, no, there's actually, already coconut powder in there. And it's just like, you just kind of put water and blend it up.
And so that's the long-term vision with the cacao is to get people off of the stimulating drink that puts them to work, and make something that makes work happy, makes it more joyful. We put lion's mane, ashwagandha, maca, cinnamon, all the chai spices, cardamom, fennel, nutmeg, And it tastes good, it feels good, and it's a great replacement to your normal stimulating morning beverage.
That's amazing. I didn't realize you put all those adaptogens in addition to the cacao.
Yeah.
To give it
So
that.
it has all of that in it.
Wow. And I had no idea about magnesium, because you hear that. It's like we're all magnesium deficient. And it's one of those things that's not as easy to replenish naturally in our diet. Yeah, that's really excellent to know about cacao. Very, very, very cool. And plus it tastes like it's chocolate.
Yeah, it is.
Who doesn't like chocolate?
Yeah. And it's not so most cacao that you get in a powder form, it's fat removed cacao. So that's one of the cool things.
Why do they do that?
Because they make money off it in other industries. Like the cosmetic industry uses a lot of it. And so cacao powder is usually fat removed. So we take cacao paste and we cold crumble it into a powder. So if you were to take this bag and leave it outside, it would turn into a brick.
Wow.
So it has to be stored room temperature. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. So on this note of cacao, this is a great segue into the establishment that you own and run here in Austin, Texas, which is Third Eye Lounge, Cacao Lounge. Can you talk about the inspiration behind opening Third Eye?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm from the hospitality industry. I was a chef. I was running restaurants and hotels. And I wanted to create something where people, would, instead of lowering their vibration, going to a bar and whatnot, I wanted to raise the vibration. And I wanted a place where people who are going through integration, through plant medicine, through trauma, through whatever it is they're going through, can feel safe, feel seen, and also create a community around it. So people can access the space, access healing, access classes, and also bring cacao into the world in a way that was seen in a different way. So I was in Vispassana. That's how it started.
Really?
I was in Vispassana.
Okay. Talk about that and explain that for anyone who's listening that doesn't know what Vispassana is.
Vispassana is it's a 10-day silent meditation retreat. It's like amazingly hard and difficult, but it's once you get through, the different parts of it, it's the most magical thing ever. It's like finding, instead of going outside, you go inside and you learn how to breathe. You learn how to, feel all the feelings and learn how to meditate in certain ways. So in Vispassana, I came into Vispassana living in my car.
Wow.
I was going through a space and time and I needed to heal for sure. And I didn't want a job and I didn't want to do anything. I didn't know what I was going through some form of depression for sure. And
how old were you?
I was, 29 at the time. No, 30. I was 30.
Okay, so 30, living out of your car, going through depression, said something's got to give. And so you went on this Vispassana retreat.
I went to Vispassana. And, I went there, I turned off my phone and I was like, let's see what happens here. It was awesome. The first 3 days I wanted to kill myself. I went through the deepest parts of like my trauma or whatever you want to call it. But it was like at the end of those 3 days, I found so much clarity and I started to be like, okay, I'm here now. I'm not going to run away from my feelings. I can't smoke weed. I can't drink or eat or do anything that's going to like potentially take me away from this darker sensation, which was really good. I got to find intimacy there. I like wanted to kill my dad. Like I was just all this suppressed energy.
Were you surprised by that? Like,
yeah.
Did you go in knowing you had dad's stuff to work on, or it just was like, hi, I'm here to be worked on now. And it just popped up.
No, I mean, there was essences of it, but not enough to like really tap into those triggers, So yeah, it was intense. It was like, and my dad was actually watching my dog at the time. And so I was like, there was something between how my dog and I have been together for 16 years or whatever, how long it was at that time. And my dad taking care of him while I needed to take care of me, and it was beautiful. On day 3, I was like, I need to create something. Like I was not wanting to work. And all of a sudden I got my energy to work again. Like my root started getting stronger. I was like, whoa, it was a big switch. the days 3 through 6, it started getting easier. I was like, oh my God, meditation is actually great. Like, I thought I knew how to meditate before, but when you're sitting in one position for an hour, you can go deeper. It's just, so that started to silence it a little bit.
What do you think that was? Like, do you feel like something opened up in some of your lower chakras, that suddenly your vital, your life force energy and your drive came back and that you wanted to create?
Yeah, it was like from contraction. The first 3 days were contraction to expansion. And then I was like, whoa, like I've got a lot of fire in there, you know? And it was like stoked at that time.
Right. And the depression probably was like starting to lift its grip 100%. At that point.
Yeah. Like I got excited about the meditations, and I got excited about going to breakfast, and I got excited to hang. I became friends with all the cows there, and I literally saw these cows and calves. The calves would drink milk from any of the mothers. It was so nuts. Like, and I just started seeing more of the oneness that I was like pushing away in some ways or rejecting. And then it started becoming easier. And then third eye came out of it. I was like, I'm going to go back to Austin and I'm going to build this thing. And on day 10, when I got to speak, all the men that were in my squad, you know, Vispassana, we just started connecting. Like we already knew each other without talking because we were just with each other for 10 days.
Yeah.
And it was like, whoa, like this person is such a beautiful being.
So they let you talk on the last day. Yeah, because you have not been speaking at all. Not one word, which is such a surreal experience to most people. Have not gone even a single day without speaking to another person in their lives, much less 10.
And it was beautiful. Like I just started loving like the other side of like the boy within and the man without, like the seeing both aspects, you know, and just being able to like love everybody with such a pure light. It was magnificent. Like I still am friends with some of these people that I didn't even know, but we got to know each other. It was really cool. And then the big shift was the hate that I had for my father turned into like love and compassion. And instead of taking on things that his generation had taken on, I found forgiveness for it, which was medicine. It was like the poverty consciousness and the divide with the war, all of that stuff. It wasn't mine to hold. And yet I was holding it unconsciously and I was able to release it. I went and saw him directly. I drove straight from Texas to Minnesota. And I was like, and me and my dad spent 10 days together and going through some battles too.
How did he receive that? I mean, did he think you were a little nuts, like all 100%. Sparkly showing up after Vispassana?
He was triggered by it.
Okay, tell me more.
Yeah, he was triggered by it. He was just like, Vispassana's bullshit, you know, because also some of the control mechanisms that was unconscious within him weren't working, you know, and I had become more of a man than the boy started, you know, becoming more wise or something. I don't know exactly what it was, but our relationships totally switched at that moment.
Wow.
And it was beautiful. Like I left Minnesota with a different essence, and I was ready to like, this is one thing that came up for me that time. It was like, my father's house isn't my roof. It's my basement. And that's what kept on coming up.
Whoa, I love that. My father's house isn't my roof. It's my basement.
Yeah.
So it's this idea that like we're building on top of what our parents gave us. And like we have to do better and we have to heal ourselves more than they were able to, as our children have to build on top of us.
100%.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was like kind of scary because my parents are very accomplished people. And I was like, before I had this mindset where how am I going to be able to take care of their assets or how am I going to keep it going? Because I just felt like so little compared to them.
Right.
Then it switched. I was like, this is just the beginning. You know, the whole narrative kind of turned around, which was powerful. You know?
Wow. So cool. So for anyone listening, I'm having a feeling that there's probably some people out there who also have stuff with their parents. You know, maybe particularly their father, but also their mother. What wisdom could you offer them if they're feeling very stuck in blame around what happened or how their parent failed to show up in a way that they would have preferred? Where can they begin to set themselves on the same healing path and the same path of reconciliation like you did?
Honestly, there's so many different ways. Vipassana is great, but also having a therapist would be good. Finding, compassion. Like, it's like not from an empathic space, not the lower stuff. You got to open your heart and just see your parents as humans instead of your parents. Because every generation, like if you know spiral dynamics, there's a different consciousness that it carries. And if you are wanting to stop what they were carrying, you almost have to take some space in order to see who you are from what they've brought to you and what you can do to start relinquishing some of those patterns and not blaming it directly to them, because it's not them. It's just the genetics, and they play a big part in how we become. Like the anima and the animus, right? The lower three and the upper three chakras. And what holds that together is the psoas. That's where all the trauma is stored.
Yes.
So I would also recommend doing some trauma release exercises. If you can find someone who can help release the trauma stored in the body, that way it doesn't go to the mind.
Trauma release exercises. So is that like, I've seen people doing shaking stuff. Is that kind of what 100%, it is?
100%. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And the idea is it's like you're shaking loose stored energy from the body, which has emotional tie.
Right. And a lot of times that emotional tie, because of the way we live, we're so stimulated, we bring it to our mind, trying to process it there. That's where the problems occur.
Right. And that's where you get like really anxious and ruminative thinking. So most people probably know where the psoas are, but if they don't, can you talk about where they are in the hips?
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that's why in yoga, they talk about doing hip openers for emotional release.
Yeah. It's like the muscle, the inner muscle between the legs and the hips and the upper body. And it's all connected. So it's like a sponge for trauma. It literally soaks it up and holds it in. And the more work you do around it, especially if you're in a parasympathetic state, you can release so much and find more freedom in your whole life.
So like getting yourself, so I'm thinking of people at home who ideally getting a massage or having a yoga practice, or like you said, working with this tremor release exercises. But if someone's like feeling like they've got pent up emotional energy and maybe just want to do a light release for themselves, perhaps slow it down, light a candle, create a ritual around some stretching. What's something they could do? Like maybe just take a lacrosse ball in the
100%.
psoas and breathe into it.
There's a really cool, I forget what it's called, but it's like this, what I'm talking
I've
about?
seen those.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a U shape.
Yep.
Okay.
We'll find out the name of that.
Find out the name. We'll put it in the show notes.
you put that right in your gut too. You can do that.
Wow. And you just lie on it and breathe.
Breathe.
Amazing. Very, very cool.
Yeah. TRE's been around for 20 plus years. And there's practitioners all over the world too. So they can always seek counsel there. I'm trained in it as well.
You are?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Good to know. And
that's what I do with most of my clients. It's always at the end of the session, we end with TRE, because everyone has trauma.
Yes.
It's just about kind of knowing.
Completely. It's so funny. That statement, everyone has trauma. I honestly did not believe that I did. And it's so embarrassing to say, because until a certain point, you're just like, I had a pretty good childhood. Like things weren't that bad. And then, enter plant medicine and enter working deeply with ayahuasca and enter meditation. And you're like, holy shit. There's a lot down here in the basement of my psyche that I've covered up just to be able to live. And I think the most beautiful thing is when we're willing to go into that dark cave of wonders, those cavernous parts of ourselves. It's scary at first. We're 100%. Like, I don't know what I'm going to find down here. This is like opening Pandora's box. But once you open it and once you face the thing that you were afraid to face, usually, and this is my opinion, facing the thing is not as hard as the initial fear of facing the thing.
Yes.
And there's this cathartic release after when you're honest with yourself and you say something in your inner voice like, wow, my mom really wasn't there for me in the way that I wanted. And it feels hard to admit that. Or, my father really pissed me off the way he did this or that when I was growing up. We want to deny that stuff. We want to take this like spiritual, like high, like thrown about it. Like, no, everything's good, but we cannot bypass our feelings. There's no shortcut to healing.
No. It's really like everyone has different core wounds. So the core wounds are what happens in the developmental cycles. Mm-hmm. I know people, some people who you think have the most picture perfect life, there's core wounds that are very different. And it's sometimes hard to relate to because everyone has a different experience.
What was your core wound?
My core wound was abandonment. Mm-hmm. There was some sexual stuff. Mm-hmm. And what was the other one? I think those are the two main ones. Mm. Yeah.
Are you willing to go into any of that with us as a piece of your story?
Yeah, definitely. We can definitely talk about it. That's exactly, I love talking about it. Now I'm at just like, when you get through something, when you have like some learning within something, there's more confidence around it.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've battled my core wounds in a way that there's some victory and some success around it. Mm-hmm. And I feel more comfortable like being able to share as well as teach and help other people with their core wounds.
Yeah. I think that's exactly what we're doing here. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. So will you take me back then to when those wounds came in for you?
Yeah. So as a child, my grandparents came to this country when I was 1 month old, and my parents were, workaholics. So my grandparents took care of me, and it was a blessing. They were at their last stage of life, and my grandma was amazing. She taught me Ayurveda and mantras and breath work and all these amazing things that if I can teach my child that at a young age, I would do that because it's been so good for me. And my grandfather was 99 when he died. He was just a really amazing, strong, high vibrational being. So sovereign, so loving, just an amazing human. And he literally walked 10 miles a day, even when he was 99. It's nuts. So they were like good people, really good humans. Like they would be at a park, or my grandfather would be at a park, and 10 people would just surround him. And it was just so interesting how his light was just very bright. My father literally worked a day job in sales and worked security at night, and they wanted to make it in America, so that was their thing. A lot of times my parents weren't attentive, or breakfast was cake, whatever was available when I was staying with them, living with them. So there was just a lack of care in some ways. They were just had goals, and coming from India in an apartment, like 10 people will live in a tiny apartment, 400 square feet. They just wanted to change that for us. And that was their intention, But with each intention, there's something that gets lacked. And we were definitely like, grandparents are taking care of you kind of thing. And the grandparents know what they know, but there's other things that were missing. So that's where that abandonment was there. I also know that my father was, when my grandfather was, younger and had him, he had gone through a depression, and my father didn't get the love that he wanted. So it's like, it's a cycle, and it just repeated itself in some ways. But from that, I know that deep down and from all the experiences, my father wanted to just be with me. If he could have had the finances and the things, his desire was to play with me, and he did. He used to, like, at times when he had free time, he used to teach me sports and table tennis. And I mean, I became a professional table tennis, player. And so I was able to connect, the negative and the positive and find the equilibrium, just knowing when you compare yourself to others, it doesn't show you the full story. But there was some discipline in what he did show me, and with what his capacity was, I mean, he did as much as he could. So, But there was an incident that happened where I was at a party with my family. And as we walked in the door, this gentleman was unzipping my jacket, and he just like fondled me right in front of my father. And my dad didn't do anything. And I was like, what the hell? Like, I didn't know what to do or how to process that.
Did he see it?
He saw it.
You were sure he saw it?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
that cuts deep.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of story around like why he didn't do anything.
Have you spoken with him about it?
We've had lots of dialogue around it.
What did he say?
He's like, I wanted to kill him at the time. But he didn't know how to or what to do. He froze. So his inner child and his adult self, there was some stuff there. He's actually gone to therapy about it since then.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've come to certain conclusions around, his masculinity and his protection mechanisms. And that person we were in the house with, that was my mom's like employer type of energy. And
Right.
so he like was scared of the system in which,
Right.
Either way, he was just giving
Power dynamics.
giving away your power.
Which is exactly where a lot of those sexual interactions happen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But, that whole incident, that person, it wasn't just me. He was like many, many, many people,
How old were you?
I was probably 5 or 6. Yeah. And it's kind of funny. The same people would be in our community, and they tried to do it again. Because my dad didn't do anything, I just like grew up. And like,
Whoa.
and I was like the wife tried to grab me too.
No.
And I like took her hand and I twisted it. I said, don't you ever touch me again. So like, I just started protecting myself.
Were you the same age?
No, I was like 6 or 7 a couple of years later.
Wow.
Yeah. And they like didn't mess with me. It was funny. They used to do it with other people.
Wow. Do you think, because I know this about you, and this is another reason why I had you speak in The Conscious Man, you've done so much work around the spirituality of sex, Tantra, and like how that can be used as a portal for awakening consciousness. Did you have a journey around this? Do you believe that those incidences affected the early parts of your sexual journey as a man in any way?
100%. Oh yeah. I mean, all of it. It's all connected. And the patterns keep showing up until I move through some of the old habits.
So what were you seeing in like your first kind of maybe few sexual experiences, or your first couple of relationships that was like that monster rearing its ugly head in some sort of way?
It was shame for sure. It was also just like a not being included in certain ways. And I think that happened just because of being an Indian person in a very white town, but I always put myself in a position where I wasn't literally a part of connection times. And it was very isolating, really lonely. Yeah. And I wasn't sexual for a long time. Like my first sexual experience, even though I had opportunities to be sexual, wasn't until I was 18. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I kept on being on the outside of those experiences. Yeah.
And how did you come to study Tantra?
It came to me really. I realized like I had some injuries, and the only way I could heal it, I found, was through Tantra. So like in order to get strong in the root, I'd broken my hips when I was young, and I wanted to get my legs, and I wanted to get my body aligned. And you can work out all you want, but if you want to work the inner muscles, Tantra is the medicine for it. I had to learn how to breathe there. I had to learn how to get strong in my body in that way. So that was, yeah.
I love this. This is really exciting because that's so not a Western mindset. It's like, we're just like, okay, get a surgery, or, go see a physiotherapist, or get a lot of massages, which are obviously very pleasant, but also very surface level. So I have to assume that your upbringing and your grandparents and kind of this this little pot that you were cooked in, so to speak, contributed to you seeking that out as a path for sure.
100%. Yeah.
Wow.
My parents had some crazy friends too, who were like obsessed with Osho and things like that. And so as a young kid, they would be telling me all these not like things that are just not normal.
Like what?
Just like about the 5-stage dynamic meditation, how to have a cathartic experience. And I was obsessed with Michael Jackson as a kid. So I had a business around dancing like Michael Jackson. That's how I kind of broke my hips. But it was also due to that thing that happened as a child. It was all connected. But I feel like Michael Jackson was not a human. And he had a traumatic experience that like he wanted to share, like heal the world. That was his like message, But it was really, he needed to heal himself, And so I was able to do whatever I could in my container, which was with my family. And then when I left, I started to explore myself more. And Tantra was like a way that I could heal my body and get strong in my roots. That didn't require surgery, and it works. It's like, I know a lot of men who take erectile dysfunction things and they don't have blood flow to their lower parts, because there's trauma there, And so even if it's conscious or unconscious, unless we, get strong in our roots, we're going to lose some part of our masculinity. And it's really like something that I did not want to happen. So it was like I could take Viagra or I could get strong in my roots, and Tantra was the way. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, I'm only just scratching the surface of Tantra in the last 4 years. The first book that came into my life was Urban Tantra, which I told you is very good for like beginners, layman's terms. It's written by Barbara Carrellis. And I remember diving into that and her talking about the microcosmic orbit, different breath patternings, different muscle locks. I don't know the proper. Yeah. So like the clench and hold, and just experiencing wholly, viscerally different orgasms once I started to play with these practices. And like many Westerners, I think I had a totally skewed perception of what Tantra was and what Tantra wasn't. You've since referred me to an excellent book, which is actually just over my shoulder here, the Jewel in the Lotus.
Oh, yeah. I see it.
Yeah. Can you talk from your perspective what you believe when most people hear Tantra, what they think it is, and then what in your experience, like it's probably hard to even put into words because it is like almost having a psychedelic journey. But if you could try to give people a picture of what it can be like.
Yeah. Tantra is definitely in the Western world sexualized. It's, but it is sexual energy. And it's like, to me, it's like the fire of creation. So we are created through sex. And it's created through love and magnetism and polarity and deep connection. And it's like the beginning part of our being, before you're a woman, you're a man in the fetus, And so when I think of Tantra, I think of expansion, I think of contraction, I think of flow. And it's one of those things where it's like we have an antenna in our body. And if your antenna is in your head and not connected to your root, you're going to be out of body most of the time. But if you're connected to your root, then there's so much integration and flow that can happen with all the chakras. So you can go up and down your body. You can flow through life with more grace and ease, and you stay tethered and connected to who you are. So Tantra to me it's like a tool for anything. You can, I like to play tennis with the energy of Tantra because it's like being in my body,
It's like pervasive breath essence tied throughout everything that you're doing.
Right.
Yeah. It's sort of like when you start meditating, in the very beginning stages, you're like, okay, I'm sitting on a cushion, 20-minute timer, I'm done. I'm sitting on a cushion, 20-minute timer, I'm done. And then after a time, you start to unhook from that voice You become the self, the capital S self, the higher self. And then I feel like there's another phase where then that spills over into your waking life, where you can start to spend more time in that higher state of self, but in your just regular activity. So it's this like waking state of mindfulness, which brings life to a whole new level.
Exactly. The way I think about Tantra is, have you ever had uncomfortable conversations?
All the time.
All the time. Whenever you feel triggered.
Yeah.
So in those moments, that's when I access Tantra. That's when I access the tantric being that I am.
Right.
I get really connected to myself. And if somebody or something is making me feel uncomfortable, I find within my body where that feeling is coming. And then I start to do the energy work there. Because it's just
like a body scan, and you identify it, and then you stay. Because I think what you're saying is, like, when we start to have uncomfortable conversations, that's when people want to shrink. Like, you actually want to physically contract. You can feel the words getting trapped in your throat, and that's where energy gets trapped, and they become all these different things like pockets of shame or regret or anger. So the practice sounds like, and this also reminds me of the work of David Data in Way of the Superior Man. He talks about, when your woman is having a reaction, instead of trying to solve it or fix it or run away, it's to drop into the breath, find yourself in your belly. Don't break her gaze, listen intently, and be aware of your breath in the middle of just listening deeply to your partner. 100%. Stay. Yeah.
And that it reminds me of, instead of being empathic to your partner, open up your heart, be compassionate. Because a lot of times when your partner is triggering you, or there's something vulnerable that's being shared, you can't fix it. You're not there to fix it. You're there just to be there. And it's all you need to do is just be there, be present to it. And a lot of times, instead of creating a fire out of whatever she's going through, or, he's going through, you're actually calming and allowing that fire to die down on its own natural rhythm. Or not,
Amazing.
So I think fire is good too, it helps with polarity as well.
Yeah, polarity and contrast too. I think I remember you saying something like, we have to slow down to speed up. Did you say that once? Yeah. Can you unpack that a little bit? I loved that phrase.
Yeah. So if your nervous system is out of whack and you think by doing more, you're going to get more done, it's just not the case. It's literally like you need to bring consciousness that's out of the body back deep down into the body. That way you'll see it from the microcosm and the macrocosm, rather than just you're so close to something that you don't see the bigger picture. And it's really important that you see things from a grounded space. That's why slowing down actually helps you speed up, because you're more of the human being rather than the human doing in those spaces. You're able to navigate better. You're able to stop fighting. A lot of times when we're in our head, there's a lot of opposition energy that's not even something that's real. So that's why I say, when you slow down, you can see things from like a more grounded space. You're not like taking it personally, you're not projecting your wounds or whatever it may be. That's just, I feel like we're all human, and there's going to be shit that comes up. But when you're able to slow it down, you're able to see it for its truth, rather than the truth that you think is true.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back to what you said about being a professional table tennis player. I didn't know that you did that. You've had a variety of interesting careers. I know you told me about another one. I don't know if you're willing to talk about that at all.
Sure. Yeah.
But when you told me that, I was like, that is one of the wackiest, coolest jobs that I've ever heard. And I also loved your process around why you needed to end that job that involved Tantra. So I'll let you take the reins on what you're willing to share on that one. But that was really fascinating.
Yeah. So table tennis was just, I'll just say a little bit about that. In high school, I started training in table tennis. I had a coach, and I would see him I was in 4 leagues. I was playing 30, 40 hours a week, and table tennis was what got my brain working. Like it literally helped me get focus and clarity, and just, it actually helps reverse Alzheimer's too. So, table tennis is great for that.
I heard that about chess too.
But it's also something that I use not just for a sport of it, but just in general. It's been having that ability to play and also use the mind. It's been really powerful in my life. I went to England for college for a little bit, and I was on a team there, and it just helped me become better as a competitor, as a man. I loved it. And yeah, nothing much to really share about that. I still can play pretty well, but there's people who are far better at this point, and it's a game you got to stay with. So the Tantra talk, I'll talk about that a little bit more. I don't want to include any names or anything.
Yeah.
Other than I had a partner for a long time, and we got out of working in 9-to-5 jobs, and we started doing some adult work, shall we say?
I'm listening.
Yeah. So the adult work was definitely helped me, see some of my traumas too. So it was a whole path, really, of how I was getting my power away, how I was showing up as a human. And we both, decided that we don't want to be working for so little and doing so much. And we were very in our physical bodies. We were very much in our animal instincts. And we started a business where we would show what Tantra was in our expression. So our clients would see as voyeurs what the experience of slow sex was, what sensuality was, what was to please a woman. So it was kind of like the antithesis of what porn is.
Right. You were like almost like a traveling Tantra show.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we did that for a few years, and it was exciting. Believe it or not, I mean, there was something really liberating about that. What I would make in literally 2 weeks of work, I would make in an hour.
So who were these clients? Just kind of affluent?
Very affluent, obviously.
Were you performing at party? I hate to call it performing, but no. It
was usually private shows, couples. A lot of times couples who were interested in, getting into some type of kink. We actually started as dominants, like doms.
Wow.
Yeah. So we were a dom couple for a while. We would show the dominant side of it. Wow. And then we realized that's not us. So we got all this equipment and did all these things, and we're like, no, we're more switch.
Yeah.
So that's when we rebranded and we showed the sensual side of things. But some of the people our clients were very powerful people who wanted to get in touch with their sexual side of selves, It was crazy. Like some of the clientele were amazing, just in terms of, how they were in their real life versus how they were in their sexual life.
So what does this tell you about people?
So much. Just, you don't know people until you get to know them, and that was something that was amazing.
And that we probably all have sexual repression.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of these individuals, one person had more people under him than the president.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. And it was crazy because he was so repressed. It was nuts. And we saw outside of him that God showed him liberation in so many ways.
Oh, he probably felt so free.
So free.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw his swagger literally shine so much. And it was like that helped me also become more of a teacher rather than a performer, so it was part of my process. And that's when it kind of changed, where I had to get out of it, like the pressure, just the amount of energy that the space we were holding, it was too much. And I stopped loving the connection of sex, and I stopped enjoying what we were doing. And that was in the chapter at the end. So, yeah.
On that note, on the note of kind of taking a break from that, that just reminded me of your celibacy journey, and you have a course, like the 100-day celibacy course. Will you talk about that experience? And people hear the word celibacy and they're like, nope, never. But can you explain why that was so beautiful for you in your life
100%.
as a practice?
Yeah. So from doing the Tantra and all of that in the I say almost westernized way, I went and learned from actual teachers who were amazing. You know, they were 70 plus years old and their energy was amazing. They were so vibrant. They were so vital.
In the United States?
Yeah.
Or okay.
They're actually their names are in that book right there.
Wow.
Yeah. So Richard and Antoinette, they're this amazing couple who teach Tantra. And I took all the levels and I was following them around and learning as much as I could. And then I wanted to share. So after I mastered the levels and myself was in a celibate space for a couple of years, I started introducing this 100-day celibacy course, which it helped me reclaim my energy, the power I had given away in all aspects of my life. And I got strong in my roots. And then I started to learn discernment. When you have a sexual trauma, sometimes you give your energy away, your power away, and it can be unconscious. And so it's the unseen, unsaid. I got to find clarity around all of that. And celibacy is one of those things where I recommend to all humans in their path. Because when you do practice that, you get to see life with a different lens and it becomes purified in some ways. So if you have trauma in your lens, that's a great opportunity to find ritual and practices that help you come back into the innocent space. So that's what it was for me. It was reclaiming my childhood. It was reclaiming parts of me that I felt like were fragmented in certain ways.
Right, because so many people use sex as a distraction, and like we're seeking that connection, that little hit, that dopamine hit of connection and intimacy and belonging that we all so crave on a soul level. It's like we come in kind of these little vulnerable babies, and I think spend our whole lives kind of searching for meaning and connection and safety and love. And so one of the ways I believe that expresses itself as a shadow is in these kind of distorted sexual interactions that most of us have at one point or another in our sexual journey. So yeah, this is so powerful, this idea of reclamation. And I think that is a sacred rite of passage for any man or woman, whatever that looks like for you. But I do believe there needs to be kind of reaching this pinnacle of sexual reclamation and sexual energy. And because it's like, you can probably speak to this more than I can, but in a lot of the Vedic texts and things like this, they talk about that being your life force energy.
100%.
And maybe you can talk about, again, semen retention and your idea of ejaculation. I love these concepts. And I think this is really important that we're not just pouring out, that men are not just pouring out their seed everywhere, and that women are understanding that our wombs are portals of creation. And we need to be discerning about the energy that we are absorbing and receiving into this very delicate energetic space, but also physically. It's this very porous, soft space. This is why I believe so many women deal with fertility issues, menstrual issues, hormonal acne, you get cysts, breast cancer, all of these things is because of, not being taught adequately how to manage receiving sexual energy.
Yeah. All of that's true in so many ways. Also just the system in which we're living in, there's not enough love, care, and intention around, treating the sexual body with respect. And it happens with circumcision. It happens with tampons, toilet paper. It happens with birth control. It happens with so many different things that are not supportive of the hormonal body, of the sexual body. And it's from both genders. It's toxic in both spaces. And I'd love to talk about ejaculation and why that course is so cool. And also think about like, if you do have trauma in your sexual body, it's going to be constantly in your lens, and there's no freedom or safety in that space unless you work through it. So for men, ejaculation is a beautiful process in which the flow of which energy is switched. You're not giving your sex or sexual energy or power away, but you're retaining it in order to create more flow within your body. So just like that semen creates a child, it also creates energy within yourself. So if you can bring that energy up and through your body, you can, if it still ejaculate, it's not like that goes away, but you do it with more intention. So, and even women too, like when women practice Kegel or, moving the sexual, the root, the mula bandha, your connection to the masculine or whoever you're having sex with becomes stronger too. So the dynamic becomes more symbiotic. And I don't know if there's a form of ejaculation for women, but I think there could be, the natural form of which energy flows. Women are naturally tantric. So that's kind of like, they already have it.
Sorry, dudes.
Actually, it's great for me. So we get more men on board. It's true though. It is. But aside from them being more naturally that way, because of the world we live in, it's kind of been taken away in some aspects, right? So like in Peru, a lot of the women go through menopause like 20 years later because of the natural supplements that they have. Maca being one of them balances, it's an andropathogen, so it balances your hormones.
It's a root, right?
Yeah.
Kind of smells like a foot.
Yeah, it's actually in this right now.
Well, this doesn't smell like a foot. This tastes great.
Yeah.
But pure maca is interesting.
Yeah, it does taste like it smells like a foot. That's funny.
But I was taking it for a while because I lost my menstrual period for 2.5 years in my 20s.
Whoa.
And for me, I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but this was before my journey into all of these things. And this is back when I was like, I don't have trauma. And I was so desperate. I had done almost everything. I actually felt like a huge imposter because at that point I had started my company, which was a menstrual period gift box for young women to honor and celebrate their rite of passage into womanhood. Wow. And I was getting asked to do all these speaking gigs in New York and lead women's, new moon, menstrual circles, all this stuff. And I wasn't getting a period.
Oh, wow.
And I was so frustrated. And I was reading everything about xenoestrogens, and I had removed plastics from my life, and I had gotten off of birth control and was trying to sync everything up naturally. And month after month after month, it wasn't coming. And I had blood work. And they told me that my hormone levels my estradiol was like somebody going through perimenopause, essentially. And of course, my energy was low and like my body hair was weird. And like I had no sex drive and I was depressed and it was just so frustrating. And I had a friend that I met at like a women's entrepreneur brunch that was like, oh, I have this tantric coach in Australia that I work with. She's helped women get her period back. I'm like, how is talking on the Zoom call with this woman in Australia going to help me get a period? But at that point, I was willing to try anything. Cause like you said, I was just everything, the foods, like I was eating more sweet potato and like trying to eat more carbs and nothing was working. But I worked with Martina Hughes, shout out to Martina, Tantric Blossoming. And she worked with me for 3 months and asked me all sorts of questions, which annoyed the shit out of me. Like, tell me about your relationship with your dad. And I was like, what does this have to do with my period? And
the shadow work.
And every call I would end up crying in frustration of some sort. And but we started to like touch those nervy places within me. And I think it was 3 months later, like I did start to menstruate. And so I was like, okay, I no longer think all this is fluff. I understand deeply that the body keeps the score, as they say.
100%.
So powerful. So powerful. But like you mentioned tampons too, and I just want to touch on that for a second, because when I was starting my company, Lunar Wild, I was just being so rigorous in the research I was doing about all the products that we were including in the box, because so many things, just like they don't have to disclose the ingredients on the boxes of your menstrual products. So think about that. Cotton is one of the most adulterated crops on the planet. It's sprayed with pesticides. It's bleached and processed in all these wild ways. They don't have to put all the chemicals that they're putting on the boxes of these products. And in fact, if you call them up, like it's hard to get an answer from these companies. And a lot of the fields where they're growing these crops, you know, there's reports of frogs with 6 legs and like their testicles growing in their throats because of all the pesticides that have been sprayed and affecting the wildlife around this. So think about putting something inside one of two of the most, you know, you've got your mouth and the mouth and the vagina are the most sensitive, porous tissues in the body. Think about, would you want to put into your mouth a cotton ball soaked with bleach and chemical and keep it in there for 8 hours? No, you would not. And yet women are doing that every single month with these chemicals and polymers that are bioaccumulative, meaning they don't get flushed out of the body. They just get stored as toxins. So when I heard this, I was like, oh my goodness. You know, many women will say that when they wear a tampon, they have more cramps than if they don't. The moment they take out the tampon, they don't have as much cramps. Well, that's your body telling you something. Same as if you have an IUD, copper IUD, and your body's rejecting it. I mean, we really aren't meant to have foreign things, foreign objects in our body all the time. And I get it. There's a convenience of taking control of your body in these ways as a modern woman. And that's why for myself, I've chosen a menstrual cup as like a very nice in between for those things. But really making sure, like encouraging women to just make conscious choices about the menstrual products that they're choosing for their bodies, free bleeding as often as they can on their lighter days. And for me, I love to do all sorts of things with my blood. It's very iron rich, and I dilute it and I water my plants with it in my home. And, you know, it's very special to me. It is a sacred ritual. So
it's beautiful.
I just wanted to name that. Yeah.
It's all Tantra right there. Yeah. And I think there's like a very beautiful and integral way to incorporate Tantra, not in a sexual way, but just honoring, you know, being in the honoring of your body and also the ritual around taking care of the menstrual cycle as well as the man too, you know, like a lot of times men who are uncircumcised, there's a lot of shame around that. And like, you know, I'm uncircumcised, you know, and so
there's shame around being uncircumcised.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel like this is news to me.
Well, it's like in America, most men are circumcised. So it's almost like my father didn't allow me to get circumcised, but he made sure that his grandson did. And I think it's part of his being Americanized in some ways. But it's like to fit in, you know? There's a culture around that, you know?
Totally. It's so absurd to me though. Like when you really unpack it, it's like, I get that there's a religious rite and ritual around it, but it's like, okay, if God made us perfect.
Yeah, totally.
If God made us perfect, why do we need everybody cutting off some of their skin? Like a piece of their body?
Yeah. And then think about it in this form, right? That part of a man's body, that when you take that off, that's the most sensitive part of their body that becomes sort of desensitized.
Yes.
And then that in itself, to me, and I don't know if this is 100% true, but is part of the unconscious rape culture that is a part of our society. So when men are having sex in that way, trying to feel that part of their body and they do it in a way that's very rough. Think about what's happening in that connection. And then that also becomes normalized in certain ways. So it's not like it's rape, but think about just the motion of the ocean in which you create that kind of vibration. It lacks sensuality. It lacks true connection. And there's just something happening that doesn't feel necessarily like. I've been with women who are used to that type of connection, and I'm very sensitive. So it's like, it's different, you know?
They're used to very rough penetration. This is very fascinating. And I feel called to, I was not anticipating sharing this right now because it's very fresh for me. But I feel called to share a piece of my first experience with Bufo, which was last week. And so that's 5-MeO DMT for anybody who is unaware. And I had and have been going through a little bit of a dark night of the soul for the last 6 months, or maybe even more, integrating my ayahuasca experiences from last year and really just feeling like I opened up so much and was a little bit alone in the thick of the weeds without a lot of spiritual mentorship at the level that I probably needed it. You know, it was like I was always in that role for others and really feeling like, okay, I got called to a higher level and I need someone to hold my hand here. And I felt kind of like it turned me inward really, really deep because I really just had to seek for answers inside, but it was pretty gnarly and scary and felt out of the blue, as most of my medicine experiences are, just kind of last minute called to a place where all the stars align for everything to happen and it's an invite and the flight, you know, takes care of itself and I'm just there. And that's what happened last week. And I did 3 rounds of Kambo in 24 hours for the first time.
Wow.
So it was like we flew in, we did Kambo at maybe 10 p.m. It was like an hour ceremony. So we were in bed by midnight. And, you know, you kind of have to eat really, you have to fast half the day because you don't want to be throwing up food. Kambo makes you purge a lot. It's not psychedelic, but it definitely is a ceremony.
Yeah.
And so it was like 10 p.m. Then we went to sleep after that ceremony. Got up at 7 a.m., did our second round of Kambo. So we didn't eat or anything, just went right back into, you know, drinking a lot of water, but into a second ceremony. And then that same day we had a third one again at 8:30 at night. So, I mean, I flushed out a lot, like a bucket and a half of vomit,
Wow.
like a large bucket.
Damn. Okay.
And then the following day was about 3 meditative doses of Bufo, followed by Changa, followed by a larger dose of Bufo. And I'm going to keep some of the details of that ceremony sacred to myself and the people that were in the room. But what I will share is that was absolutely harrowing. And there was a darkness there that I did not anticipate that I would need to wrestle with. And people talk about Bufo and kind of meeting God and touching that space where you remember yourself. And I absolutely did for maybe 10 seconds. It was like, oh, here's bliss. And then the moment I felt bliss, as we talked about contrast, I remembered what was not bliss. And that there was a part of me, which felt like a part of my soul, like a fractal of my soul, that was trapped somewhere else. And in this journey, I immediately was like flushed down into this dark astral space to go retrieve this fractal of my soul. And it was like drowning in a black ocean. And it was like being plummeted in the face by like shadow waves and gasping for air, trying to find my breath, feeling like I was being groped and touched and stroked, and feeling like there was this like lizard tongue energy giving me cunnilingus that was non-consensual.
Oh my God.
And I could hear, because, Bufo is like an experience of definitely being disembodied. So I could hear sounds that sounded like hissing going on, like echoing from far away. I didn't know if they were my voice or something else. And I could hear the music and the energy of the people in the room saying prayers, saying they loved me. But it was very intense, palpable energy. And then what came into form, and this is the part that I want to share that reminded me of what we were speaking about, was this piece of my soul was in this dark astral space being fucked by dark, angry, violent male sexual energy. And it was like watching a movie where I was just being raped on repeat in this astral space. And the people in the ceremony were so incredible. And they helped lift that heaviness with their love. But it was like, I remember also hearing wailing. Later, I would find out it was my voice, but you feel so far away from your body when you're in Bufo. And it was just like, I can't believe this has been happening to me, And it's not just me. It was like, I came out of that ceremony and of course I had been completely disembodied. So apparently my eyes were open for part of the ceremony. I don't even remember. I didn't see a thing. But I was at points touching my physical body in ways that the women in the room told me was like a sexual aggressor, like very masculine, groping my own body, my tongue was making lizard noises. I was taunting people in the room, or I say but the energy that was there.
Wow.
And
that's powerful.
It was very, very intense. And when I came out, your hair is standing up on end. When I came out, there was a woman in her 60s that was there also doing Bufo for the first time, which was so sweet. Her children had brought her for this healing experience, and she had been so afraid at the beginning of it. But this 62-year-old woman grabbed my face after with love, with tears in her eyes. And she just said, "That was beautiful. Thank you so much. You're so brave. Thank you for healing that for women."
Yeah.
Wow. And it was like this energy that I know this is the work, this is the work that we're doing. We're, by deciding to heal these things within ourselves, we're lifting them from the collective.
100%.
In whatever way that is for you, whether it is or is not plant medicine, whether it's through your sexual practices, whether it's through your meditation, whether it's through your journaling, whether it's through your therapy or talking to your parents or making conscious choices, like you are healing the collective in your choices in every moment. And we are building on the roofs of our parents.
Yeah.
And to remember that.
Yeah. 100%. That is part of the evolution that we're choosing to do. And that's the work. It's a ripple effect. The more we can work on ourselves and not even work on ourselves, it's more about integrate.
Right. Right. I love that you just said that. It's not even work on ourselves, because when I had Brandolyn on the show, we went for a walk afterward and she goes, "Why do people always call it work? It's shadow work. It's inner child work. It's, all this,
it's not a good connotation for it.
It's like, no, it's play. She goes, "It's play."
Yeah.
Shadow play, inner child play.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. And it's the attitude we bring to it, right? If it's work, it's the same thing. If you make it play, then there's There's more grace and ease in that, I think, at least. And I'm a huge advocate for plant medicine. Definitely set and setting is super important. And when you are feeling safe and held, like the container you are in, tremendous things can happen. And that sounded like amazing. That's really cool.
Yeah. It was pretty big.
I've never even heard of a Bufo experiment like that.
Yeah.
Sounds really cool.
Neither have I. I don't think anyone in the room maybe has seen anything quite like that either. But yeah, it took all hands on deck to transmute that energy. And actually saying the word transmute makes me think of alchemy, which is a thing of yours, like this idea of inner alchemy, right? Do you want to talk about that for a few minutes?
Sure.
Like, what is inner alchemy and what is this practice that you do with inner alchemy?
Definitely. So inner alchemy is, alchemy in general is when you're burning something to find purity within it and the essence that comes from that. So like, if you look at a plant, the plant is got a root. It's in the ground, and it maybe flowers and blooms, and then it also dies. And through that death, you might be able to create essential oil from it, whatever it is. Same thing goes with alchemy. Is something from some of the lower parts grows into the body, and then it fruits potentially. And some of those fruits are not necessarily the most amazing things, or it could be, but it's about alchemizing that into its next evolution. So through that, it might have to come back down, might have to go through the digestive fire, and then from there it becomes something else. So as humans, our microbiome is constantly changing, and the connection we have to our heart and our brain, that's what creates more of the resonance, right? And so when we have dissonance or blocks, we don't have that same connection that we want. And through inner alchemy, we're able to continuously see the aspects of ourselves and reformulate it and do that in a way that you're able to take something that you thought or something that you believed and find the true essence of what it is. So it's taking something that's flowered, whatever it is, and it's no longer flowering anymore. You gotta alchemize that. So you have to bring it back and burn through it, through the digestive fire, go back into the roots, and then it becomes something else. And that's what the inner alchemy is. And it's just like consciousness. A lot of times, we go up and down, we go through waves in life. When we have to alchemize something, it's like an ego death, and it can be very difficult. So
yes, it can be.
And that's why plant medicine can be very useful. And just having the tools to get into the parasympathetic state in order to access certain consciousness, that's how we do the inner alchemy. So we get into those states and we tap into the actual fragmented aspects of whatever something or someone has experienced, and we find the connection. We find how we can take the adult self and nurture the inner child and find the holing that needs to happen. So that's what, for me, inner alchemy is. And I use ritual, I use herbs, I use various techniques, and then it's all about embodiment. So at the end of the day, instead of trying to get away from the body, get closer and closer and closer to grounding the whole body, getting really intimate with your toes and your legs and your thighs and your genitals and all of that, and just like really finding home in this body, So that's for me what inner alchemy is, and it's not just one thing; it's a whole package of things, and that's what what we do at Third Eye Meditation Lounge is a form of rooted integration, which is how inner alchemy was developed for us. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Third Eye is such a sweet space too. Like you walk in there and you've just got all these super top-notch ingredients, and you can get all kinds of cool things, adaptogens added to any of your drinks. And it's funny, I have a story about being in there one day because I was getting a cacao made, And I really liked the style. This is so silly, but you and I were nerding out over kitchen things before. And I really liked the style of whatever little blender you had in there. So I was going to take a picture of it, right? I was like, can I just take a picture of this? I think it was like, looked like it was made out of copper or something like that. It was super cool style. And one of your staff that was working there didn't know I was taking a picture of the blender, and she thought I was taking a picture of like a label of one of your products. And she's like, you can't take a picture of that. Neil is just, he's so like protective in honoring his sources. Like you are so meticulous about where your products are sourced from. And I actually loved that your staff member was like trained in upholding the integrity of what you were building. And I know that you were sharing stories about learning about these Ayurvedic herbs and medicines from your grandmother. And I can't imagine what that was like growing up, just like being surrounded by those things. And I'm assuming, like, I'm picturing it like they were just in jars and on countertops and everything like that. And so for anyone who hasn't heard anything about Ayurveda, can you just talk about, just for a few minutes, maybe like the doshas and like different constitutions? And maybe if we get into, I don't know if you know anything about tongue scraping. This has been something I've been dying to talk about on the show, because I am just so converted to tongue scraping and oil pulling. So like, if you want to dive into any of these things for people, I think it'd be so helpful.
So I'll just say, Ayurveda was like the base of my life. It was something that I was interested and loved and still love as a child. Like, my grandma was really obsessed with the right ingredients. Literally, for grocery shopping, we would go to like 10 different places, because everything every store was better at one thing than the other, or this farmer's market or that herb store or this. And so that was more of my intimacy with the herbs. And now, if you come to Third Eye, it's not just Ayurveda. We do Chinese plant medicine. We do Amazonian, all those things from South America, like cacao. Cacao is not okay according to the dosha system.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But to me, I think it's great. Because if you think about how our world works, most people are highly caffeinated. I think if we take them down a notch and put them in their heart space, it's just one more level or layer that they don't have to be in, which is constantly in the mind. But Ayurveda is about being balanced in your doshas, and it's a seasonal thing. So as we all go through seasons, just like our earth does, so does our bodies. And it's about having those things in balance. So I'm tridoshic, but as the seasons change, there's certain things I need to do in order to keep myself in that balanced space.
So tridoshic means that you're balanced in three doshas.
Yeah, all the three doshas. If I go live in Minnesota, I wouldn't be tridoshic. So it's also based on environment. And I highly think environment is how our health works.
So what are the three doshas? I'm going to put you on the spot.
So fire, air, and then water. Yeah.
And their other names are what?
Pitta, kapha, and what is the other one? Vata.
Yes. Is that one air? Okay.
Yeah. And so when it comes to like our bodies, our gut is like it's like how our Agni is created. So when our fire isn't ignited, then we have issues with digestion. And so that to me is like the base. If you're not digesting food properly, then there's something kind of going off, So I always start with the gut, whether it's parasite cleanses or just like changing certain foods, you know?
Switching to broths and things like that for a while. Yeah. Depending on what's going on.
Yeah. And the healing food that I always recommend is kitri. Have you heard of kitri? Yeah. So if you can go on a kitri diet.
Can you explain to anyone who doesn't know what kitri is?
Kitri is like lentils, some herbs like turmeric and ginger and certain like cumin and things. And then lentils and rice. That's it. And I used to add vegetables and ghee. So I know it's not vegan friendly, but ghee is super healthy, I think. It's one of the best fats in the world. So yeah, that's it. I mean, kitri is something you can eat every day, and it's really nutritional, and it's good for the gut. So if you do that for a month, like every season, you'll just be able to acclimate to the environment better. It's kind of interesting how that works.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Awesome. The last thing I wanted to touch on, and then I'll open it up to anything else that you wanted to touch on before we tell people where to find you, was you mentioned much earlier on the concept of spiral dynamics. This is another buzzword I feel in this kind of spiritual community. It's starting to pop up everywhere. Can you just expound on spiral dynamics, based on just what your basic understanding or in-depth understanding is at this point?
Totally. I don't know a lot about spiral dynamics, but I do know that right now in our world, there's like 4 or 5 different bodies of consciousness. So that means our parents, our grandparents, us, and the new generation literally carry different forms of consciousness, levels of consciousness. And that's never happened before, where there's so much diversity when it comes to the consciousness.
Right.
So they say, I think we're in teal, like teal is the new one.
Okay. So there's like these color bands. Someone else was explaining this to me, and you could be in a certain color band, and then somebody else that is just in a different color band, and they're seeing the world through the lens of their consciousness, which might be more or less fear-based than yours, depending on where you are.
It's the same thing goes. Like, let's say you just started to make better money. Your fear around money is going to change, right? Or you just started becoming more successful in your career. Your fear around what you do is going to change, or how you're impacting the world is going to change. And there's obviously highs and lows to that. But when there's consistency around who you are as a being, you start developing your realm or your consciousness, and it becomes more secure in certain ways. So, I mean, I myself have been through different forms of consciousness, and there was so much death and rebirth that had to happen before I was able to up-level my consciousness. And it sucks, but it's awesome.
Right.
And I just recently kind of went through one this last year.
Did you?
Yeah. Like going from third eye on the east side to third eye at Casa de Luz. That was a level up for sure, and I went from being in fight or flight a lot to not. And just being able to receive and being able to be more and do less. It was like going from the green to the teal. So yeah, it's powerful stuff.
Before we began this podcast episode, and you made this cacao for me, which, by the way, we're going to tell people how they can find it at the end, and how they can get 10% off of their 15% off of their cacao order. And not only that, if you order any cacao through the coupon code Thought Room, you're actually going to be supporting the show in addition to supporting Neil. So that's like a win-win-win. Yeah. Everyone wins with that. But while we were cheersing, we had a little ritual. And we said a little prayer of intention for this podcast. And we both really just wanted whatever information wanted to come through to be shared with the collective at this time. My question to you is there anything else still tugging on your heart as we come to the final few minutes of this conversation that you feel so excited and fired up to share with people now?
Other than the fact that we can all do this work from anywhere around the world, just being able to share what you're doing, what I'm doing, I think it's something I'm very grateful for, and I appreciate you having me on. I have nothing else to share at this moment. I feel really good about what we've talked about, and looking forward to do more of these things with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's do some in-person events here in Austin too. That would be really dope. Yeah. If anybody listening wants to be in on that, go ahead and email us, thoughtroompodcast@gmail.com. So, okay, Neil, where can people find you on all the things? So maybe give your Instagram, your website, tell them where to order the cacao with our coupon code, all one word, Thought Room, and we'll go from there.
Perfect. So Instagram, you can find me. It's at Neil Ryan Dumra, NeilRyandumra. thirdeyecacao.com for the cacao, thirdeyemeditationlounge.com for our local, in Austin, we have a meditation lounge and we have events, almost 2 or 3 different classes every day. And then if you're looking to work with me and my partner, Ash, we've got something called the Rooted Integration Project, which is all about healing the core wounds, developing ritual, and helping get out of the fight or flight and into the parasympathetic space, getting to flow. And it's an amazing program. It's a 1-month program. So, and if you also want coaching just from me, through Tantra, through working through some of those trauma and all that, it's thirdeyetonic.com.
thirdeyetonic.com. Awesome, Neil.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. This
you
was a blast.
Me.
This
Yes.
was just as good as I knew it would be. And I'm just so delighted to have you here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.